Welcome to A Therapist, Buddhist, and You. My name is Luke DuBois, co-host here with Zalmal. I am therapist and founder of the Recovery Collective here in Annapolis, Maryland. And Zalmal is a Theravada Buddhist Practitioner and Coach as well at the Recovery Collective. Welcome back, everyone. And hey, Zal.
Hey, Luke. Good to be here again.
So I think we're going to talk about a sweet spot for a lot of people, and that is the benefits of mindfulness and how it can help them in a healthier mindset, specifically mindset, but we might talk about it can certainly help with not just a mindset, but physically as well.
Yeah. And as you know, we're new to this, new to being behind these mics. So this is kind of interesting because like you have mentioned in the previous episode, our goal is to become more true to ourselves and present our true personalities through this. So that's my mission for this podcast as well. So I came here.
Brace yourself, ladies and gentlemen.
I came here unprepared. All I knew is that we're going to talk about mindfulness.
Do we edit that out? Do they need to know that?
So go ahead and I guess that's a good title, but I just wanted to let you know that I came here unprepared and everything's going to be spontaneous, which can be part of my mindfulness practice as well.
And I did say this is Zal's sweet spot, and I have some things in mind to talk about that I wrote down. But let's start with this question, shall we? Here's the hard-hitting question. Can you explain the concept of mindfulness? We hear it all the time, mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness, and explain mindfulness. What is it? And maybe how it's evolved to your version of mindfulness, learning and practicing mindfulness and what we see in America. Is there a difference? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very loaded question.
I already went off script. That was quick.
Yeah, so I think there are different ways to answer it, but I will get more into it as we start talking more. But the short answer would be along the lines of mindfulness mean non-judgmental observing of what is actually going on in the present moment would be my short answer. But I can also give you a long answer.
I'm ready.
Which will probably bring up more questions from you. So like in my tradition where I'm from, originally from Burma, where Theravada Buddhism is practiced, which we also did an episode about what Theravada Buddhism is, which usually translates as the practice of elders, which also translates as sticking to the original suttas without modification, without much of interpretation, not much of commentaries, but let's just stick to the original, which also means it's quite monastic and a little restricted in a way. So mindfulness is a translation of this Pali ancient word. In Burmese or in Pali is tati. The English transcription of that is S-A-T-I, sati, which interestingly is also one factor of the well-known Buddhist path called the Eightfold Path. And it belongs to the concentration category because the Eightfold Path can be categorized into three parts. One of them is morality, second is concentration, and then the last is wisdom. And mindfulness belongs to that second category, which is concentration. So in those terms, it's called Dhamma Tati. Dhamma usually is translated as right. So right mindfulness is the instruction for the Eightfold Path. That's my long-winded answer. I don't know if there is or even an answer in that.
So now do this. That's the expanded version where we could go a lot of different ways with it. Now give me the Cliff Notes version. If you were to sum up mindfulness in a couple words, what does it mean?
As I mentioned earlier, it is no judgment awareness or bare attention of what is going on in the present moment.
So now as I'm scratching my head, the no judgment awareness, how can that, in a positive way, affect my mindset?
Yeah, so I like that. So as a Buddhist, the mind is a tricky thing. So the mind is always giving me information that is not really based out of reality. There's more interpretation than the actual. Because if I look at reality, I don't see reality as it is. I see it as my mind sees it. So mindfulness goal is to break that down. In other words, the stress, the anxieties, depression, negative self-talk, all these things are self-generated, which is not the true nature of the mind. But when we are floating in the surface level, I guess the opposite of mindfulness would be mindlessness, or not being mindful. We are in the superficial level where things are clouded. We don't really know what's going on. But when we penetrate into the deep with that power of the observing power, in a way, which is what mindfulness is, you go to the true nature of things.
Okay, so some listeners may say, I am very mindful of my racing thoughts and my anxious thoughts that riddle me all day. What does a mindfulness practice do for that individual that is so aware of their anxious thoughts?
Before going into that, I also wanted to mention too, maybe people are aware of this already, but mindfulness is a term that is invented. It is not part of English language originally. So that's where I find difficulty about, because when something is being explained, it's not about, there's a little bit about person explaining it, but it's more about person who's hearing the explanation. So I have my own understanding of it, but when I am explaining it this way, it has to be relevant to people who are listening. So I want to question the person who's asking first about when did you first hear about mindfulness? I'm pretty sure you didn't grow up hearing the word mindfulness. So that to me is a gap that needs to be filled or that needs to be addressed.
I think in some ways it can be a buzzword. And what I mean by that, as a therapist that owns a practice that we hear, a wellness practice. What does wellness mean? What's the difference between health, wellness, and recovery? Well, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Mindfulness, when did I first start hearing the word or understanding? I think it's so ingrained in the culture now of what it's become of mindful eating, mindful approach to life, mindfulness and meditation. So I'm at the point where maybe because of what I do in my profession, I don't remember when this didn't become the norm.
Here's an interesting exercise for people who are listening and for myself as well, is that we can apply mindfulness to the concept mindfulness. So when we practice mindfulness to this idea of mindfulness, what happens?
You're blowing my mind, but go ahead.
So, because, to reemphasize, it is a word that is invented. So I'm pretty sure instead of using the word mindfulness, if I use the word attention, it's probably has been with you longer than the word mindfulness.
Yes.
Since from a young age. So I think it will be helpful to talk about it from that point of view of attention. So
tell me if I'm off base here. When you said remove the word mindfulness, my first connection that I made to it is maybe because what I do in my world as a therapist. Okay, I can feel this. I can feel being mindful. So I relate it to a feeling. Maybe most people don't do that, or maybe they do. I don't know. But when this word wasn't invented, being present without judgment, it's a feeling to me. It's a connection with a groundedness we've talked briefly about before. To me, it's a feeling.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with, intention or attention, because I think it's helpful to think of examples. You can think of somebody who is doing something mindfully and doing something not mindfully, which to me, again, when I am clouded by judgment, I don't see things as they are, which also means that I'm not clear about my intention. So each moment is precious, which also means that each action is very meaningful. But there's a difference between when somebody doing it intentionally and just doing it mindlessly, So that's where the mindfulness comes in. So I can give this gift or give this water, a glass of water to you, Luke, when you're thirsty.
Well, thank you.
And I can give it to you, hey, here you go, like without much of a care. Or I can put all my intention to this generous act, although it's just water. And I can put so much essence and meaning behind it very mindfully with all the intention, as if this is the most important gift ever in the whole world. And you'll feel it when I put my mind to it.
So for you, does mindfulness evoke a positive feeling?
It is.
I think I know where you're going to go with that question. Because it's not that black and white.
Yeah, I also wanted to make it clear that it is a tool. So when there is a tool, it's not about the tool. It's about what the tool can do. So if I have a hammer, it's not about the hammer, but it is the fact that it can punch a nail into the wall. So that's why I think maybe we've already talked about, this is my go-to example when it comes to words and symbols and stuff like that, is that we get too attached to a symbol or a word as if it is a thing on its own, which is not, The famous example is this martial arts teacher pointing the finger to the moon, and the student is staring at the finger, and then the teacher has smacked his face. Why are you looking at the finger? I am pointing at the moon, but why are you paying attention to the finger? Because it's not about the finger, it's about what it's pointing towards. So that's why, same approach with mindfulness too, is that instead of what it is, but what it is that it can do.
Some people might think we forgot the question, how does mindfulness help with those racing thoughts that people are often very connected to or aware of? Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zal Mal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zal Mal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zal Mal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing.
Yeah, so the other example would be, in addition to being a tool, it's also about, you cannot be, I don't know if it's possible to be mindful of the mindfulness, but when you are mindful, there has to be an object. I guess this is true for meditation. When you are meditating, or when the mind needs a task, it needs to find an object. So, there's this famous Satipatthana, which is a discourse specifically about mindfulness. And there are 4 foundations, or 4 dwelling, or 4 abiding for the mind to dwell on. And it's not necessarily about these objects, but how the quality of mindfulness comes up. So to your question of being mindful of racing thoughts, being mindful of depression, when the quality of mindfulness is not understood to a certain extent before that is attained, if you turn your attention to these, you'll do this prematurely and you won't feel any benefits. So that's why the first approach always is the breath. So when you become mindful of the breath is just an object of this mindfulness activity. and it's not the goal, but it's more about the quality that comes out from that practice. And once you start feeling it, which is also, again, why this is difficult to talk about meditation and mindfulness without actual practice, because words are just words and things can be very theoretical and abstract. But
so let me do this.
All right.
Our title is A Therapist, a Buddhist, and You. And right now there's a listener that's going, I have racing thoughts, Zal, and how can mindfulness help me with my racing thoughts? So I go, gosh, I know what Zal's saying and it's making sense to me, but how does this help me with this level of anxiety? And I just want to slow my brain down. I'm very mindful and present of my racing thoughts. Can mindfulness help with this?
Yeah, I don't want to be beating around the bush, but at the same time, there is the importance, as I've emphasized over and over again, the disadvantage of doing it prematurely.
Okay.
So there's an idea of expectations when somebody is, I need to slow my thoughts down, and only mindfulness can solve it. But what I'm saying is that the first step will be to pay attention to something that is neutral. So there can be different objects of mindfulness. So like if there is a car that is going really, really fast, and if you try to pay attention or try to be mindful of that car, probably not a good idea because it's going too fast. Mm-hmm. So you might want to start with a bicycle that is going very slow and mindfully watch that, as opposed to, I'm going to watch this F1 racing car and try to be mindful of each single moment of how it's going. So again, I think you've talked about it in the previous episode of this quick fix society. So when I have racing thoughts, I want to slow it down right here, right now with mindfulness, which defeats the whole purpose of the practice. So that's my answer to your question, which is saying no, that it can be done, but not prematurely.
And what makes it prematurely?
Yeah, so I don't know. This is also the part where it's interesting because, we're doing this Therapist Buddhist. I don't know if there is, this is interesting, but like for me, this is also my prompt and my mission too, in a way, is that if there is a gap that needs to be either filled or addressed. So, I'm not going to hold myself back and be completely real here. Yeah. Is that mindfulness is extracted out of Buddhism. Buddhism stripped away is mindfulness, which is an incomplete picture of how it comes out. So there's so much expectations out of it, but there's also so many things underneath that wasn't taken with. So that's where the gap is. So I don't know if I have feelings about this, but I'm actually pretty motivated about this topic because one specific example is that you have racing thoughts and there's a cost for that. That's also what Buddhism is about. There's a cost. If there's an effect, there's a cost. But then if I'm using mindfulness as a tool forcefully to stop that without addressing the cost, no benefit's going to happen. So the missing piece where mindfulness comes from is the first category of the Eightfold Path. So that's also what I meant by prematurely. So if I am lying all the time, or if I have killed some animals, and if I have stolen, and I have all these racing thoughts, but I've denied that I've done those things, and if I'm trying to practice mindfulness to slow my thoughts down, nothing's going to work. Because the origin of the problem is not lack of mindfulness, but it's a lack of these right actions that were violated.
So mindfulness might be able to be used for a momentary slowdown of thoughts as possible. But what you're also saying is, hey, mindfulness isn't designed to be a quick fix. It's not, hey, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm this, I'm that. This is my answer to my suffering or my cravings or my mental health disorder. That there's more to it than that. That there might be some underlying causes and conditions for these racing thoughts.
And, I think it has become very popular and people have put too much weight on it, even to the point of like mindfulness is an all be all solution, which is not true. It just, as I mentioned, is one of the factors, if not not the major factor. So from the Western mental health or medical point of view, some people even equate mindfulness as like a medicine. So if I have depression and if I have an antidepressant, if I take this, depression is going to go away. So if I apply mindfulness to this, it's going to go away. I think that is unfair for the concept of mindfulness, because it is not something that is prepackaged and you can just buy it and you get it and you use it. But it's more about, there is an aspect of self-development along with it as well, because it's a tool, but it's not like a prepackaged thing that is given to you and you can just open it and then use it. But it requires sharpening, building, practice. That's why it's also difficult to talk about mindfulness without the practice, because only through practice, systematic approach, only then it comes. So yeah, so I don't know if that's helpful at all, but it has become so useful and popular that people rely so much on it, but it's also backfiring.
Are there any other potential drawbacks or limitations that you see with mindfulness?
So in that category, there's tammatati and tamadi. Tamadi means concentration, and which is a counterpart of the vipassana meditation. So, meditation has been with human civilization for a long, long time. But, the Buddhism added something to it in a way of like the concentration meditation can be about focus. But then the insight meditation or the vipassana meditation is more about still the concentration present, but it's more about learning or letting the true nature of things arise on its own. What is actually going on instead of being so concentrated. So for mindfulness, the limitations is that I guess there are some meditation teachers who use this metaphor of a bird. If a bird is just using just one wing without the other wings or without other feathers, it's going to be lopsided. So mindfulness cannot, if it's extracted out of Buddhism on its own, it will probably go out of proportion. Mm-hmm. But if you get the whole package, it's just one of the factors that's gonna. And then the Eightfold Path is also used as not as steps, but it's like a spoke of a wheel. So if I just use mindfulness as one spoke over and over again, the wheel is not gonna roll. It needs other spokes to be evenly spread out so that the wheel can be round and then roll smoothly. So to answer your question of like the disadvantage of the limitations would be to rely on it without any other possibilities. And that's also another thing, that if it is practiced systematically, piece by piece, the whole other spokes appear, because you are practicing mindfulness, but also at the same time being open-minded. So something is revealed to you the more you practice it, if you do it in a systematic way.
Once again, our philosophy is collectively or holistically treating. How do you see the field, the powerhouse that is a profession for a lot of people, the field of mindfulness evolving in the future?
I don't know. I feel hopeful about it. And I also hope that there will be less of a gap, between, I just feel hopeful about the future. Maybe I'm just very overly optimistic because I like the fact that people are getting warmed up to the idea of mindfulness. So like, it's better to have people practice mindfulness or meditate a little bit than not at all, So even if there's a gap, but at least people are being exposed to it, that's better than not being exposed to it. Mm-hmm. So the gap can be filled down the line, but it's good that it's out there. And it's also good that, because there's a tension if mindfulness is a Buddhist thing, and if it is advertised part of Buddhism, that becomes a religion thing. So I kind of like the intention of like mindfulness being extracted out of Buddhism as if it's not a religious thing, which is more user-friendly.
And I think you asked me that question earlier. I almost don't remember a time pre-mindfulness, and I think that's what mindfulness did, as opposed to meditation, where meditation might have a more of a Buddhist kind of connection, where mindfulness sometimes feels even more removed from the cultural or the connotations of Buddhism, to be honest with you.
And, as maybe I've already mentioned it in the episode too, but I've mentioned this to you over and over again about that when it comes to Buddhism, I am kind of new here in this society, because, if there is a concept and if it is translated, brought here, and when people start operating from that extraction, it starts its own world, which can be detached from the original world. So for me, I know it is important for me to interact and use this word, but the more I use it, the more I'm lost. Like, what is people even talking about? Because I don't have much of a Burmese community interaction, like monastic Burmese people. So I'm still getting used to, like, oh, actually, what is me? Because I have this built-in translation mindset, because Burmese and some of the Pali terms are how I know these things originally. But then there's also not really a disharmony, but like, again, I can't think of any other word than the gap. There is some kind of a gap going on. But for this podcast, though, I don't want it to be too, controversial and too, drifting out. But for the purpose of, collective solution to wellness, I do want to emphasize about the importance of practicing mindfulness. I don't want to evade the question, but at the same time, I think that answer of non-judgmental full attention of what is going on at the present moment, I think that's a good enough.
When you do that, what are potential long-term benefits of that ability to be mindful in that way?
So long-term, this is also the part where I find it difficult to whether or not differentiate between mindfulness and meditation, because that was my original idea for the theme of this podcast, this particular episode about the benefits of mindfulness, because the long-term benefit is that we're with this mind since we were born until we die, and we don't have a user manual for that. So it might as well be very helpful to understand the nature of the mind, because if we think about many things that we suffer from, it originates in the mind. Mm-hmm. So when we turn our attention to it to learn the true nature of the mind, although it seems kind of counterintuitive, so if I'm having relationship problems, if I'm having money problems, if I'm having problems with jobs, my immediate intention would be, I want to get more involved and solve it. But meditation and mindfulness and spiritual practices tells me, no, go inward. Learn how your mind is working. Sit with it in silence, in stillness. What is your mind actually doing? Which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, I want to go out and solve the problem, So to answer your question of the long-term benefit, which is a reading that I did, very short reading a long time ago. I don't even know who wrote it, but it described this individual who went into the forest on his own individually on this quest of studying the mind. And the writer's argument is that is the most human thing that he could ever do, which also is counterintuitive, right? But when you go inward and try to learn the nature of your mind, which I think is some parts of mindfulness as well, because you're learning, being present with the mind and learning the true nature of the mind, you become so intimate with all the other human beings in the whole world, because we have this mind which has predictable patterns for everybody. So when I have a true understanding of my own mind, I also have a true understanding of humanity. So that was the original idea of the podcast, is that it is counterintuitive, but like when you are in tune and learn the true nature of your mind, your world open up and people are friendly to you. You're friendly to other people because you know what it means to have a human mind, and you know how difficult it is to have a human mind and how much of a suffering it brings.
So I'm thinking about the listener and I'm going, okay, how do I put my mind in the listener right now? And what would I ask though? So based on what you just said, doing a mindful breath exercise can get me there?
No promises.
But we said long term, right? So long term potential benefits. I mean, that's where my mind goes.
Yeah. And I confidently want to say yes. And I will confidently say yes. That is the point that we will get to. But remember that spoke example,
Yes.
the spokes of the wheel. So it cannot be lopsided. So that's my heartfelt understanding of the spiritual path as well. Once you wholeheartedly, because if I'm treating it as like an antidepressant, I'll just use it and then, okay, yeah, I'm done. I'll just move on. Which mindfulness can be treated that way too. That, oh yeah, I'll use it when I need it and I'm done. But if you fully dive in and then really make it to be part of your life and part of your practice, everything else comes to you naturally. So like this idea of compassion, wisdom, kindness, empathy, all these qualities are going to come along if you wholeheartedly practice, because the true spiritual path doesn't eliminate, doesn't discriminate, doesn't limit you. If you wholeheartedly truly follow to the deepest, everything else follows.
There are people listening that, gosh, this is wonderful. I've had benefits of doing some mindfulness exercises. Zoe, with your experience, how would you teach to children or adolescents mindfulness? Because we see today how many children, adolescents are so easily distracted, and we're talking about a healthier mindset. That was what we're focusing on. Gosh, how can I help these children that are attention spans are YouTube, scrolling, all these things that we have a society designed for distraction as opposed to awareness and connection and some of the benefits of mindfulness. How would you go about that?
Yeah, that's a very difficult task. Well, my short answer is, to practice being present, because a lot is happening in this present moment at any time. We have senses coming in, but again, this is also what I was saying in the very beginning, is that having a human mind, the natural nature of the human mind is to choose and pick. Mine is not equipped to being aware of the sound as I'm talking to you and being aware of my legs touching the floor or the skin sensation touching the clothes. Like, these are all happening, but it's not in my tendency to pay attention because they're not as important. So the practice will be to open our senses in a way that what is actually present right here, right now. And it can only be done when there is less noises, both literally and metaphorically.
Correct. So Zoe, when you were a novice monk at the age of 13, the conditions were a little bit more set up for you to be less distracted, correct?
Definitely.
What was your setup?
Briefly. I like that.
What was your setup at 13 to practice mindfulness and other forms of meditation?
Head shaved. One meal a day.
One meal a day.
No electricity.
What time?
Before noon.
Before noon, one meal a day. Okay.
No entertainment, no reading, no music, ropes, village, cows,
so that were
buffaloes.
That were in the monastery and the
mosquitoes too.
That was your distraction, huh?
Yeah.
Swat that around. So that was your distraction or lack thereof. Now children and adolescents are filled with it. What recommendation do you have to potentially help set some structure and to keep this simple for parents with their kids that want to give a little piece of mindfulness to their kids?
Yeah, I have even started practicing a little bit of that with my kids too, which is a challenge. But my philosophy is consistency. That even if it's a short little bit, and there's also an aspect, it's very helpful if it's a communal thing or family thing, instead of doing by yourself.
Connection and community.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it can be as simple as, nature walk or having a room that is quiet, even if it's like 2-3 minutes, like setting our intention, like let's be quiet and listen to our inner world and outer world. And that's it. Be present with it, So if it's done consistently, it's in a way of like unplugging from this, literal plugging in, of our attention, because that's how social media, internet, they say attention is a new currency, which is true, which they don't really probably like the mindfulness, because when you become mindful, you want to unplug. Like, yeah, this is draining too much out of me. So the suggestion would be to set a time, quiet, peaceful, even if it's short. Yeah, consistent.
Zal, years ago when I took his mindfulness 4-week course years ago, I was struggling. Gosh, I just can't do mindful. I can't practice this meditation daily. I would love to do it daily. And Zal just listened to me, and he was very present, and he listened to me, and he talked about his culture, that this was just a norm to do these mindfulness practices. Zal certainly meant nothing negative about that, but Zal looked at me and he said, just like I brush my teeth every day, I just so happen to meditate every day. And it just hit me. And Zal followed that up with, doesn't mean you have to do it for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. It can literally be the same amount of time that you brush your teeth, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And that gave me the mindset of, I can commit to this practice for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and do this mindfulness. And I think that's actually a great thing to do collectively with kids. Structure routinely, whether it's after brushing teeth, before you go to bed. Hey, let's do this breath work, this mindfulness practice for 10 breaths or 2 minutes. What a great routine structure and just practice.
And then, I do not want to avoid the term mindfulness, but I think it's more user-friendly and intimate when we use words like attention or intention or awareness, consciousness, being present. These are all different factors of mindfulness, but it is a buzzword. So sometimes we just scratch it at the surface level. So as you were saying, because I want this podcast to be practical as well. I don't want this to be philosophical and too up in the clouds. But to that question of being aware of your racing thoughts, how does mindfulness bring benefit to that? So if we think about it from the point of view of awareness, attention, spaciousness. So if I truly practice mindfulness, it's not about making these racing thoughts disappear, but becoming aware, just like we were talking about earlier. My mind is conditioned to pay attention to one thing that I'm paying attention to, not other things, because that's what it's trained to do. So when we practice mindfulness, which is kind of against this norm of the mind, what the mind does, we become aware of all the other possibilities. So when I hear something, and if that something is making me angry, I just want to focus on it. But what mindfulness can open up is, how about the sound of the birds that you're hearing while you're angry? How about the sensation of heat that you feel when you are doing your out breath? How about this pleasant sensation, at the bottom, whatever it is, when we start paying attention, it's not about making this racing thoughts or feelings go away, but it's more about becoming aware of the spaciousness, all the other things that is available beyond. Because when we are in the thought, when we're in the feeling, when we're so obsessed with it, we think that's it. That's all our existence, nothing beyond. So the benefits that the mindfulness can bring to these racing thoughts, anything, is the awareness of so many other things outside of this little tiny, although it doesn't feel that way when you're feeling it, this feeling, emotion.
That's definitely a healthier mindset.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to talk about that jumps out?
I think that covers it all, because we can definitely revisit this. I do want to conclude with a couple of thoughts about just Buddhism in general, or just, the term mindfulness specifically. Is that, I don't know if the hats are the right metaphor, or I have different roots or branches, or different angles from this, is that as a cultural, as I grew up, the word sati, how I heard it, and also my academic learning of Buddhism, and also my own practice experientially. So these are all evolving, growing concepts. So I think it's worth revisiting. And also there is a new part, is me helping people. That's also the thing where I'm learning from, where I see, because, I have received more than given back like in my society, I was a receiver of these concepts. But here, I try to give it to other people. And it's been helpful to see how it works and then people's feedback to it, especially because of the cultural difference, you know. So I think the essence is even more from these interactions when I try to explain and that it doesn't make sense or it makes sense, you know, whatever it is, I'm gaining more feedback. So this is an evolving experience that is worth revisiting, you know, at times.
As we will weave these things in, and as you bring on the wonderful Buddhist perspective and Theravada specifically, what takeaway do you want them to leave with in terms of mindfulness and the effect of their mindset?
That it is easily accessible, that you don't need to go find a guru to practice it. You don't have to find a perfect teacher. So it is something that is easy, available. It is not as complicated as it is. So that's a message that I want to bring across, that it can be done. And there's no wrong way to do it. That's also another important thing.
Zomo is not your guru. That is a little Tony Robbins joke. It was on Netflix. But if you'd like to work with Zomo as a meditation or life coach with Theravada Buddhist practitioners, give us a call. Zol wouldn't do that, but hey. Thanks all for giving us all your wealth of experience, knowledge, readings, understanding philosophy, and we'll do our best to simplify and how you can use this as a solution practice to your practice overall health and wellness and well-being moving forward. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you very much.